Associate Justice on the Minnesota Supreme Court. I'm delighted to be part of the program today. I'm the Senior Justice on the court. That and $10 will buy you coffee somewhere. Just means I've hung around for a long time. But my connection with this program goes back more than 20 years. I had the opportunity to be an assistant coach on a team from Hutchinson, Minnesota that went to the national competition on several occasions. And since then, I've been a judge at the national competition. And I know we're in a difficult environment, but really it's gone very well over the last couple of days, and we've had great conversations, and I think we're going to do that today as well, and I'm delighted to be part of those conversations. So, Teena?
Well, I think it's my turn now to introduce.
It's your turn, yes.
But anyway, my name is Tandym McConnell. For about 20 years, I was a professor of history at Columbia College in South Carolina. About 3 years ago, I decided to do something a lot harder, so I'm not now teaching 8th graders in Orangeburg, South Carolina. If any of you remember the 8th grade, I'm guessing it was an interesting year for you, as it has been for me for the last few years. But I'm delighted to be here with you and looking forward to discussing the Constitution with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Teena Gabrielson. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Wyoming. I teach primarily political philosophy, so American political thought, along with the classics. And I've been a state judge twice for We the People. This is my first time at the national level, and it's been great fun so far. So we are looking forward to another exciting round here with you. If you would introduce yourselves and then introduce us to your teachers, that would be great.
Good morning, we are Reno High School's Unit 1. My name is Austin Durman, and I will be attending the University of Nevada.
My name is Kathleen Bradley, and I will be attending the University of Utah.
My name is Zak Dyson, and I will be attending the University of Nevada.
My name is Miriam Yoon, and I will be attending the University of Nevada.
And my name is Wally DeBarger, and I will also be attending the University of Nevada. Our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark, and our unit coach is Mr. Brian Carlin.
Great. Well, with that, I'll go ahead and read the question. We're in Unit 1. What are the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system? And we have question 3. Aristotle asserts in Politics that it is not the form of government, rule by the one, the few, or the many, that matters most, but rather the ends of government that are most important. Where in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution did the framers set forth the ends of government? How did the framers differ, if at all, about how the ends of government should be prioritized? Which of the ends of government set forth in the Declaration and Constitution appear to have the highest priority today? You can go ahead and begin when you're ready.
We agree with Aristotle that it is not the form of government that matters most, but rather the ends that are the most important. In the Declaration of Independence, it lists the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This establishes a hierarchy of governmental ends such that life must first be protected, then liberty, which then allows for the ultimate end of happiness.
The founders emphasized the ends throughout the Declaration, writing that government should organize its powers that will most likely affect safety and happiness in the people. The grievances listed against King George III included that he ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. The British government turned against life, liberty, and happiness for the American colonists, and by declaring independence, Americans demonstrated the extent to which they believed in these ends of government.
Under the Articles of Confederation, only the ends of life and liberty were met. To remedy this, state legislatures sent delegates to the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. Notably, James Wilson emphasized the Declaration's focus on happiness, writing that the happiness of the society is the first law of every government. Wilson expanded on these laws of government in the preamble, asserting that it is not an unmeaning flourish. The expressions declare the principle of this Constitution.
These principles of the Constitution within the preamble articulate additional ends to the governmental hierarchy, holding that government is intended to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. These specific ends work towards the overall goal of promoting happiness.
The framers agreed on how to prioritize the ends of government, but they disagreed on how the ends should be achieved. In order to protect their liberties, the Anti-Federalists advocated for a Bill of Rights. In his second essay, Brutus argues that Bill of Rights acts as a grand security to the rights of the people, and that the government's exercise of power should be restrained. In contrast, Alexander Hamilton argues in Federalist 84 that Bill of Rights is not only unnecessary to the proposed Constitution, but will even be dangerous.
Another disagreement on the achievement of the hierarchy was the means of promoting the general welfare, explicitly mentioned in the Taxing and Spending Clause. Federalists argued for the inclusion of the Necessary and Proper Clause of Article 1, Section 8. However, anti-federalists argued in Brutus 1 that this would result in absolute and uncontrollable power.
These principles aren't merely antiquated ideals lost in history. As COVID-19 affects every American, the end of government with the highest priority today is protecting our right to life. Our own Governor Steve Sisolak has exercised state police powers to protect the domestic tranquility of Nevada by implementing a moratorium to postpone rent payments. The Supreme Court previously upheld this power in the case of Home Building and Loan Association versus Blaisdell in 1935, deciding that moratoriums do not violate the Contracts Clause of Article 1, Section 10.
In order to promote the general welfare, Congress passed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which allocated funds to individuals, corporations, state governments, and students. To further protect the populace, President Donald Trump should deploy the Defense Production Act to increase manufacturing and distribution of necessary medical supplies.
Furthermore, the Department of Justice asked Congress to allow any chief judge of a district court to pause court proceedings, creating potential implications for habeas corpus, which is protected in Article 1, Section 9. In doing so, the department is prioritizing the common defense against coronavirus.
Aristotle sets out in politics that the state is created for the maintenance of life. The government must take action to protect Americans from the dangers of COVID-19. Only through these actions can the hierarchy of ends be promoted. Once life and liberty are protected, we can pursue George Washington's idea that the establishment of our new government seemed to be the last great experiment for promoting human happiness. Thank you.
Great. I'll go ahead and begin with our first follow-up question for you. So for the founders, one of the ends of a federal republic is avoiding the most common faction, that between the rich and the poor. How effective has the US Constitution been in this regard?
The US Constitution has played a part in this idea of breaking the barriers between the rich and the poor that may have been present before may have been more present before the development of the Constitution. And one of these ways is guaranteeing birthright citizenship. So in this way, we do not just have jus sanguine, but we have jus soli. So everyone who is born in the United States has an equal chance at becoming a citizen and obtaining the American dream that has perpetuated throughout culture and history of America.
For the framers, the easiest way for them to distinguish what was class and what was high versus low society was that of nobility. And so by removing titles of nobility in the Constitution, they're able to break down for them what was the most obvious barrier of a class distinction between high and low income people.
The framers were influenced by such philosophers as Aristotle, and Aristotle believed in a strong middle class economic class structure to be more moderate views within our society.
So you began your questions with, or began your statement in advance of our questions, discussing Aristotle. And I'd like to talk about Aristotle in the context of what political theorists and political scientists talk about the progressive era of reform, beginning about 100 years ago or so, maybe a little bit before that. Coming out of that was the initiative, referendum, and recall, which are three examples of that progressive reform. How would Aristotle feel about those reforms? Would he be in favor or skeptical of them? Why or why not?
Well, as Aristotle says in Politics, it's not the form of government that matters the most. So the ways that we decide to govern through initiative, recalls, and referendums are not of the greatest importance to him. It's more so why we are doing these things, why we have these ends of government of life, liberty, and happiness.
And we can see that the Progressive Era was really influential on our modern politics. The 19th Amendment, the enacting and removal of prohibition, large political shifts happen at this time. And so as we look at this, my colleague Kathleen is right. It doesn't matter how they got to those changes. What matters is what those changes were and what they accomplished.
Very, very good. Let me move in a different direction. You cited the Declaration of Independence about the, as an end of government, the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson was, I'm sure you know, borrowing from John Locke's phrase, life, liberty, and property. What is the difference between property and the pursuit of happiness that governments are apparently instituted to protect?
Well, for James Madison, they were extremely similar. Property and happiness were the same concept. He writes in his essay on property in 1792 that property is not just your possessions, it's not just your land, it's not just your home, it's property of your being. It's the ability to exercise your religion, to take advantage of your liberties. It's the property over who you are, and that was his meaning of happiness.
In addition to this, property back then didn't necessarily just mean land, but it also meant one's own conscience and then also intellectual property, which is why we have the inclusion of the patent clause in Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution.
And even before the Declaration of Independence was being written, phrases like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were being found in the Virginia Declaration of Rights written by George Mason. This idea that we have these founding principles transcends just simple American ideals, but generally the whole colonies as a culture can be summed up by these three ideas going into the future.
In addition to this, Thomas Jefferson didn't just pull from the two treaties of government, he also pulled from John Locke's an essay concerning human understanding. And in this, John Locke actually goes more into depth on the meaning of happiness, and he kind of equivalates it to property by saying that it is the ability to use your intellectual property to create some sort of self-fulfillment.
Outstanding, thank you. So, Teena, you're up.
Okay. Wait, we had time, right? So, okay, I was sorry. I was thinking about your use of Locke. I'm going to provide you some feedback in terms of how you're thinking about Locke. And so I think that this hierarchy of rights that you've created makes some common sense, right? It has some common sense to it, that life would precede liberty, would precede happiness/property. But for Locke, right, he's arguing against or in fear of an absolute monarchy. And so for him, you cannot have life without liberty, right? Liberty actually makes life possible for Locke. And so I'm wondering, you know, again, right, that's a really nuanced reading of Locke, but I wonder if these rights are a bit more entangled than they are prioritized. And so that would be my only feedback. I think you did a fabulous job, and I really enjoyed your presentation and your responses to our questions, but I wanted to give that to you to think about.
I'm sorry, Teena, but there were still about 45 seconds left in the hearing.
I apologize.
So go ahead and ask a question. And
okay, well, you'll give them the time for me to ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Okay. So the follow-up question I'll ask you is, has the definition of good government changed over time?
No, good governments have not changed over time. Like Aristotle says, it is not the means, it is the ends. And for us, it is the ends of protecting life and liberty and happiness. If governments are able to do that, no matter what time, place, manner that happens, as long as those rights are protected, that is what makes good government. That transcends a simple one government itself. That is for every government.
my colleague is correct, but this doesn't mean that government has always been good. We are continually trying to create a more perfect union, and we are able to do this through the amendment process outlined in Article 5. So all of our amendments to our Constitution are working towards a good government. All of our state actions, yes. May I
Finish your
finish?
sentence.
Okay. So every action the government takes is working towards being good to promote our ends of government.
Thank you. Feedback?
So
Judges?
I'll jump in here and just say that I thought it was a very strong performance. And as to the time clock issues and whatever, let me just say that when we have oral argument the first 2 weeks of the month, there's usually 1 or 2 of these where we have a very similar issue and somebody thinks that they get an extra couple of minutes and probably should get a couple extra minutes to answer the question. So these things happen. But I just wanted to say that one of the things that I found impressive about your answer was or your statement rather, was the grievances against King George. We focus on the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, but we forget the body. And there's something like 26 separate complaints about the king that are in that Declaration of Independence. The weird thing about it is, among British kings of his era, King George probably was not among the worst. So these things are all relative, I suppose. I enjoyed your discussion about Aristotle and your point about form. Aristotle was concerned not about the form, but about the results. In response to my question about the progressive era reforms, I thought was quite good. And I haven't heard anyone talk about the patent clause before. So that I thought was well done as well.
I would agree. You had some very strong answers on Teena's question about the rich and poor as factions, bringing in birthright citizen titles of nobility. How often does that become an issue? And yet there it is, and I think you're absolutely right. Aristotle's focus on the middle. Aristotle is really hoping for a government of the aristocracy, by which he meant the best people. And he saw that that's not necessarily an aristocracy of birth, but of qualification. So I think you raised some really important issues there, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Teena, do you want to add anything?
I do. So I apologize about that. And I just want to explain, it's really a compliment because you had me thinking deeply about the presentation that you were giving. And so I lost track of the procedural necessities. And so I apologize about that, but I thank you again for really great, thoughtful, and provocative entrance into the material.
And as you go to college and maybe go on to law school, you'll discover professors, lawyers, and judges all share that characteristic in common. So.
Okay, so now I'll invite the judges back to their breakout room.
Thank you, judges.
And
Thank
invite you to depart.
Thank you guys for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great.